Hey there folks, noticed a dip in views on my latest videos, so I figured it's time to shake things up. You all seem to enjoy the first part of our Mythbusters series, and I promised to follow up if that was the case. Well, I finally got around to it and whipped up the second installment of this fantastic and super intriguing segment. Today you'll find out, can you destroy an enemy tank with a ricochet off a destroyed tank? Does the missile have its own 3D model? Can the Helsing take out 2 tanks with 1 shot? What happens if a submerged tank tried to capture base? Is it possible to spot enemy tank behind a mouse? And lastly, can a tier 1 tank withstand a shot from a Jg.Pz E100? Yep, all that's coming up in today's episode, and let me tell you, it's going to be fascinating. Also, we'll announce the winners from my last giveaway. Let's dive in. Let's start with a pretty straightforward yet fascinating question. Can you destroy an enemy tank by ricocheting off a corpse? For those who don't know, when a shell ricochets off a live tank, it continues on its trajectory, and sometimes even hits another tank nearby. It's quite rare, but it does happen. Now, what happens if you try this with a destroyed tank? Logically, everything should be the same, so let's put it to the test. For this experiment, I've chosen the most heavily armored tank in the game, the mouse, and our gunner will be the Grill 15. The trickiest part here is getting the trajectory right. We destroy the tank and begin. Ready? The very first shot hits successfully and destroys the enemy. Honestly, I didn't expect that to work. Kudos to the developers for such cool attention to detail. I won't keep you waiting. Let's move on right away. The next myth revolves around whether the Sheridan missile has its own 3D model and is unable to pass through narrow gaps. Let's find out now. For this experiment, I've set up this structure. The mouse and the Sheridan will stand close to each other, and I'll stand behind and try to launch the missile directly into this narrow gap. In theory, the missile shouldn't be able to pass through and should stop. Let's check it out. On the first attempt, what do we see? The missile passes through without any problem and doesn't touch either tank. Honestly, this was expected because creating a separate model for the missile would be very difficult and, in reality, doesn't make much sense. But I didn't stop there. If the missile doesn't have its own model, logically it should be able to pass through any gaps. So, I took the object 263 and tried to launch the missile between the hull and the bucket where there's space. And what do we see? The first attempt failed. The missile just crashed somewhere. But on the second shot, the missile easily passes through and continues flying. All subsequent shots also pass through effortlessly, and I suspect it's due to the armor. If you look closely, there's a red zone here which seems to be in the air, and most likely the missile crashes into this armor. But I went even further and became curious. Can the missile pass through this small gap in the Grill 15's armor? Before firing, I had doubts because this gap turned red when I aimed at the tank. And as expected, the missile doesn't pass through this gap. However, I noticed another gap in the sights. This time it wasn't highlighted in red. I thought this was it, but unfortunately the missile doesn't pass through here either. This doesn't mean the missile has a model, it's because the Grill 15's armor doesn't have holes and what I see in the sights is just a texture. So the myth is successfully debunked. Before moving on to the next myth, I have a recommendation for you. Exciting news for everyone who's living in the United States. You have the opportunity to snag a free $100 for any products at the TeamU Market. If you haven't heard, TeamU's the place where you can get just about anything, and the best part is their prices are way lower than other stores. To grab that $100, all you need to do is download the app using my link or enter the promo code you see on the screen. All the details you can see in the description or pinned comment. Happy shopping and enjoy those sweet deals. The next myth revolves around whether the Helsing can destroy 2 tanks with a single shot. If you don't know, Helsing has a dual-barreled gun and fires 2 shots at once. So theoretically, if 2 low-health tanks are standing side by side, there's a chance to destroy both with 1 shot. But that's just theory. Let's see what happens in practice. I grab the Helsing, and first I need to get used to aiming. Since the turret rotates very slowly, I'll rotate the hull instead. Now, we need to line up both targets for 1 shot, and then we can proceed. Ready? Here we go. Yes, success. Just as I thought, the Helsing can easily destroy 2 enemies at once. Well, maybe not so easily. Such a situation is unlikely to occur in battle where 2 enemies are standing together, both with low hit points. But nevertheless, the myth turned out to be true, and now you know it. By the way, in the game, there's also a tank called the Annihilator, which fires 3 shots at once. If you want me to test it out with 3 enemies simultaneously, then hit the like button, and if the video gets enough views, I'll check it out in the next part of Mythbusters. Now let's move on to the next myth. This time we have a myth that's particularly interesting to me personally. Can a submerged tank capture a base? Honestly, I have no idea what would actually happen in such a scenario, so let's test it out. For this experiment, I've taken a small and light tank that can be easily submerged and then dragged to the base. And as the towing vehicle, I've chosen the E100. Let's get started. First, we submerge the tank. This is no problem at all since the tank is low and can sink even in a puddle. Then, with the help of the powerful engine, I pull it out of the river and tow it to the base. And now, the moment of truth. And honestly, I'm disappointed. For some reason, I thought the base would be captured from the tank's corpse, since the tank isn't completely destroyed and even appears when you aim at it. Nevertheless, the myth turned out to be false, and the submerged tank is unable to capture the base. Let's move on. Imagine a situation where you're facing a mouse, and behind it there's another enemy tank. Can you detect both of these tanks, or just the mouse? This question seemed like a fascinating test of realism to me. Let's test it out. We'll take some small tank that will stand behind the mouse, so it won't be visible. And I'll try to detect both of these tanks. Let's go. Right now, both of these tanks are behind the corner, and I'll suddenly emerge to see which one gets detected. Here we go. Seriously, I was sure this would work and only the mouse would be detected. Well, it seems the developers overlooked a small detail here, but no big deal. It won't give you any advantage in battle, and the myth is busted. You can't hide behind an ally. Now, let's announce the winners of my previous video giveaway. Congratulations to all the winners whose names you can see on the screen. You'll soon receive the tanks you specified in the comments. And if you didn't win, don't worry, I have a new giveaway for you. This time, it's a collectible Tier 10 tank, the T95E6. You'll find all the participation conditions on my Telegram channel. The link will be in the description and pinned comment. I suggest you participate because with fewer people participating, your chances of winning will be high. Here we are at the most interesting part. Can a Tier 1 tank deflect a shot from a Tier 10 tank destroyer? For this experiment, I've chosen the Cruiser 2 with the Jg.Pz E100 as the shooter. Now, this tank has a very powerful gun, and you might think it's impossible for a Tier 1 tank to deflect such a shot. But let's test it out. First, let's take a look at it through the sights, and it's quite obvious. Even at angles, the armor is easily penetrated, and there's no hint of any bouncing. All right, let's try a little trick. If you're not aware, in the game, there's a fence, and each part of it slightly reduces the shell's penetration. And on the Port Bay map, there are many of these fences lined up. Just what we need. We'll place our target at one end of the fence, and the tank destroyer will shoot through all parts of the fence. Ready? Bam! Would you just look at that? The tank is destroyed effortlessly on the first try, but oh, how beautiful it looked from the outside. Nevertheless, I still couldn't penetrate the cruiser, so I move on to the next step, which is finding weak spots in the armor. First, I tried shooting at the track wheel, but that didn't yield any results. Then I noticed this red texture on the rear of the hull, and you might think, so what? Many tanks have protective screens, but the key is that if you shoot at an angle into this area, the shell cannot penetrate the armor. Success. And indeed, a Tier 1 tank can withstand a shot from a Tier 10 tank destroyer. Honestly, I didn't believe it until the very end. Well, friends, the video has come to an end, and I sincerely hope it was very interesting for you. I also hope to see some activity from you in the form of comments and subscriptions to the channel. By doing so, you'll let me know that I should make a third part of Mythbusters. Also, don't forget about the tank giveaway on my Telegram channel. Until next time, bye for now.